Well, this is embarrassing. The US delegation, the junior delegation, as it turns out, was refused entry to the G20 closing summit.
No.
Well, this is embarrassing. So it turns out that Donald Trump didn't want to go to the G20 summit because of some nonsense genocide story. And it turns out that he did actually send a partial delegation. And so when he's saying, oh, we can't go there, we couldn't possibly go there, he did actually send delegates. Now, the closing ceremony was earlier, and during the closing ceremony, the US delegation, the junior delegation, as it turns out, was refused entry to the G20 closing summit. Apparently, they cried a lot and were very, very annoyed and very frustrated that they weren't allowing Americans into the South African G20 summit. Folks, your comments, would love to hear them.
No.
We did not deny anyone access. The United States is a member of the G20, and if they want to be represented, they can still send anyone at the right level. It's the Leaders Summit. The right level is head of state. It's a special envoy appointed by the president of that country. It could also be a minister. And we have always been open, so we have not denied anyone. What we have said, because it's an officials level in terms of that issue, is that DERCO accept the fact that the US is going to be taking over this platform of the G20, and we welcome that they want to take it over. They can come at our offices, and the right level officials will hand over the G20 to the American officials.
So no access to the charged doping?
No, they are allowed to participate, so it's up to them. But the issue of handover, the President of the Republic of South Africa will not be handing over to the chargé d'affaires from the US. We will be handing over to the US in the DERCO offices, or anywhere they may want us to arrange within the borders of the Republic of South Africa.
Here's your G20 morning scoop and drama. South African government says because the United States of America sent a delegation lower than the head of state, Pretoria will also send a delegation lower than a head of state to hand over the G20 presidency. On the other hand, you have the US that is accusing Mzansi of stalling the big president's handover after the climate clash. And Matamela is saying, you send us an ice boy for a handover, we will also send our ice boy. It's a better for effect, a tit-for-tat. That's how we roll. Asidlalila.
My people, did you just see what President Cyril Ramaphosa did to the officials who were sent by President Donald Trump to attend this G20 summit? My President Cyril Ramaphosa is no longer playing right now. Like, he doesn't care who you are, where you're from. If you disrespect him, man, he's gonna give you the same energy. Just listen to what President Cyril Ramaphosa did to these people who wanted to disrespect him. He needs hope, man. Listen to this. A diplomatic standoff erupted at the G20 summit today after South African officials refused the entry to junior level USA staff attempting to attend the closing ceremony. According to senior government sources, the delegation members arrived without the necessary accreditation, prompting security to deny them access to the higher level proceedings. South Africa reportedly insisted that only properly accredited senior representatives may attend the final session, a move interrupted by some observers as a firm response to recent tensions over US attempting regarding the summit and the South Africa's leadership of the G20. This is crazy, my people. President Cyril Ramaphosa right now, man, he's the head of Africa right now. He doesn't bow down to the USA, to the influence of the West. He is on his own, my people. These are the kind of presidents that we need at this time around. We need the generation, the generational leaders, the leaders who suits our generation. The time to bow down to the USA is over. Africa now has its own voice, and big up to President Cyril Ramaphosa for representing more Africa. You are loved worldwide by every black man.
South Africa stands on the front line of international politics, absorbing the blows, taking diplomatic bullets, and carrying the burden of being the continent's loudest voice in global forums. Yet, when its president is targeted, mocked, or publicly undermined by Donald Trump Africa responds with a tragic and familiar weapon: silence. This silence is not new. It is a political instinct shaped by fear, fragmentation, and a lingering shadow of a colonial psychology. The belief that one must not anger the empire. When President Cyril Ramaphosa was ambushed in Washington months ago and again last week, the continent's leadership did not rise in defense, not even a whisper. And this is the same continent that would watch Europe lock arms around President Zelensky within hours when he is publicly criticized. That unity by the Europeans is not simply about Ukraine. It is about political self-respect. It is about an instinctive understanding that an attack on one of them is an attack on all of them. Africa does not yet have this instinct, and the consequences of the silence runs deep. A continent that cannot defend its own leader in the global arena cannot pretend to be shocked when foreign powers divide it, weaken it, and pick its states off one by one. This is the same colonial playbook used on Kwame Nkrumah, on Thomas Sankara, and on Gaddafi. Isolate, delegitimize, and then attack, and the rest of Africa would look away. But the tragedy is that African leaders treat their own citizens with the same coldness, the same distance, the same habit of silence. The way African presidents abandon each other is the same way they abandon the people they govern. When citizens cry, they respond with statements, not solutions. When the poor are exploited, they look away as long as their power remains untouched. When injustice burns through the streets, they treat it as a noise instead of a warning. When state violence unfolds, they become suddenly unavailable. The cold diplomacy they show to one another is the same cold governance their citizens experience daily. A leadership culture built on detachment inevitably produces a continent without solidarity. Africa's unity is not stalled by external forces alone. It is stalled by internal emotional architecture of its leadership. A leadership that has not yet learned how to stand for one another, nor for the people whose dignity gives them the authority in the first place. And so, every January, the African Union gathers and repeats the ritual of unity, declarations, resolutions, speeches quoted with eloquent promises. But unity cannot be summoned in conference halls if it disappears in the moments of testing. Unity is not a performance. It is a reflex, a shared habit, a political instinct to protect what is ours. Until African leaders learn to defend each other in the world and defend their citizens at home with the same courage they use to defend their power, the continent will continue to stumble. Not because it lacks strength, but because it lacks solidarity. Today, we celebrate President Cyril Ramaphosa not as a perfect leader, but as a symbol. A reminder that Africa cannot claim dignity abroad while practicing indifference at home. The unity we preach must finally become the unity we live.